Well, good morning and welcome, everybody. I am Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting Program Director Gus Ramsey, and thank you for joining us both here on campus and online. We have a very special day today as we have a couple hosts from WWE Smackdown Live. Unfortunately, Byron Saxton will not be able to join us today, so as Tom often does, he'll have to carry the show. I would normally, this is when I would introduce somebody, but when you have someone who is paid professionally to introduce people, I think I'm just going to ask Kayla to go ahead and introduce Tom.
Oh, so we're skipping over introducing me, I guess.
No, we're gonna flip the script in a second.
Oh, Tom Phillips, yes, the voice of Smackdown Live.
That raucous applause? Yeah. That was easy. And Kayla Braxton, ladies and gentlemen, the backstage interviewer for SmackDown Live, the interviewer.
Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, if that was an in-ring introduction,
I would probably ask that he didn't do that anymore.
I'm no Greg Hamilton.
a lot of times when we do these segments, I always like to try to dive into people's backgrounds because I think it's important for our students to hear the journeys that people have taken in their professional careers. Because a lot of people can get to their goal, but how they get there is not the path that they think they were going to take. So I want to start with you. What was the first flashpoint for you that said, broadcasting is what I want to do?
Well, I went to college at Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. I was in their broadcast journalism program, minored in sports broadcasting, but my dream was actually not, it was more to be like an entertainment and travel host. That's what I've always wanted to do. My first job out of college was actually right here in Orlando, Florida. I was the travel host at West 2 News, the NBC affiliate. And I worked there for about 2 years before I left to try and see what else was out there. And I got a call from Greg Hamilton and asked if I was interested in working for WWE. And I got to be honest, I kind of was like, I'm good. No, thanks. I never grew up watching it, didn't know much about it, didn't realize the magnitude of this company, but I came out and auditioned over at the WWE Performance Center down the road and got to witness one of the NXT TV tapings. I don't know if you've had the opportunity to attend one of those. And then I fell in love with the company then, and 3 years later, I'm still here.
So your path was incredibly short. You just went college, West, WWE.
I grew up as I was a public speaker. I was a competitor in public speaking. I was a cool kid. And so I was kind of honing in those crafts at a very young age. And then when I was in college, and we have some interns here, and I kind of give the advice of don't wait for opportunities to come to you, create them for yourselves. And I know a lot of you here at Full Sail, I'm sure, taught that every single day. And so when I wasn't in class or working, I was creating my own online content for the Belmont University and for the city of Nashville. And creating that YouTube channel and that online platform is actually what my employers here at West 2 News saw, which is why they gave me the job at West 2 News. So, just creating content.
So if you're scoring at home, best West graduates, Stu Scott 1, Kayla Braxton 2, Gus Ramsey like 78, 79. Lee DeJarlis, who's in the room today, he's going to crack top 50 one day. So it's funny because I went Rollins, Wesh, ESPN. So, Tom, I'm sure you had a hop, skip, and a jump to get right to WWE.
Yeah. My path was very peculiar in that I was knew since I was like 12 that I wanted to get into broadcasting. And I pretty much just woke up one day and I was playing sports and everything, and I was like, I'm not really going to be an athlete. But at the same time, I was like, I wanted to stay close to sports, I wanted to stay close to entertainment. And my first opportunity was doing like PA announcements for a JV football game when I was in high school. So I kind of got the bug, and then I was, looking into different camps and stuff like that. I did one at Penn State. Brother went to Penn State, my mom went to Penn State, so that kind of led to me going to Penn State. And their broadcasting department, their communications department is fantastic in my opinion. And I had a great experience, and then when I was getting out of school, I think like anybody, you're struggling to find your niche and everything. It's not easy to find jobs in broadcasting, period. And I had the opportunity to call Division III men's and women's basketball, football, and everything, $50 a game, just kind of making ends meet as much as you can. And I had an opportunity that I found out about. It was a website that I've was subscribed to at the time, staatalent.com and everything. Really helpful in terms of people looking for jobs, by the way. The WWE came across, and I was like, what? Because like I watched WWE for years, but I was like, no way. Like you had to know somebody or something like that, so they put the job lead out, and I was like, okay, great. I'd never thought of it as a career path and everything, and just didn't know he stumbled into that. I applied. I didn't think the audition was like anything crazy or something like that. And that was June of 2012. In September that year, I got an offer, which was crazy. So I got hired at 23, and I was super naive. I was really stubborn and really naive, and I just had no idea what I was walking into. Because to Kayla's point, this is a vast universe and everything in our world. So walking in, I had to learn a lot of different things. I've had so many people along the way, Michael Cole, Renee Young, countless others who've pointed me in the right direction. So this was never really the goal from childhood or anything. It was always about getting into broadcasting. But now that I'm in it, it's really, really difficult for me to think about doing anything other than what we do.
So you started at 23, so you've been there 27 years.
Wow. 27 years,
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm 92 years old, yeah.
When you were calling the lower level sports prior to WWE and making that $50 a game, what was your mind frame like day to day to just stay above the water?
So I was doing, there were a lot of like head-to-head games they would do. So like they'd do the men's and then they do the women's game like the same afternoon on a Saturday, and then they do a doubleheader again on Sundays. So that was, again, during the basketball season. And then outside of that, I was spending 5 days a week working at an Olive Garden. So pretty miserable during the week and everything, just kind of like working for the weekend essentially. So didn't make a lot. Was just kind of paying rent, and that was about it, and making sure I had food. So it's not easy, and it's not like I had some ridiculous struggle. There's plenty of people who do that for 15 years. I was fortunate to do it for 11 months and got this job and everything, which is insane. So I was very lucky, but at the same time, I was trying so much to find different opportunities and everything. I applied for a job in Billings, Montana. And my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, is like, if you moved to Montana, we're probably not going to keep dating or anything. And I was like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you apply anywhere. That's kind of the gig. Like people are like, oh, where should you look for internships or jobs or anything? I was literally applying everywhere, trying to find something and everything. And it's really challenging to find your own like market or something like that. That's like, okay, this is where I'm going to land. It's super hard to break in.
I know he's not here, but I know you know Byron's story. So just share a little bit with how he was able to make that transition from wrestler to broadcaster.
Byron's got an amazing story because he went to the University of Florida, got his communications degree, and then he was actually working as a sports reporter in Jacksonville, so on the local news and everything. And then he always had the itch for wrestling, and he had his own, like as a kid, he had his own wrestling league that he created and everything. He jotted down notes and everything. So he's been a fan since he was a kid. So obviously a guy who's in great shape, was an athlete at one point in his life and everything. So got an opportunity with us in the FCW days and everything, which was down in Tampa. At one point it was here and all that. So he was a wrestler for many years and everything, and he was on the early incarnation of NXT, very different than what you see, across the way when we tape. And Byron could always talk and everything. So when the in-ring career ended, he had an opportunity to do commentary. And he is literally, I'll say this, he's worked for us for 12 years now. He's done literally every commentary position that we possibly have, from ring announcer, backstage interviewer. He's worked in the creative department, helping out talent in developmental and everything. So Byron is the Swiss Army knife of our broadcast team, can literally do everything.
I had a glorious 6-month stint at the WWE working on Edge and Christian Show Season 1. And when I walked in the door, the first day, people were like, it's going to take you a while to get used to the culture here. So you both started there very young. Starting with you, what did adapting to that culture mean to you?
I mean, yeah, coming from working in a local TV station where I got there at 9, I left at 5, had a pretty good shift. I'd go out, get my stories during the day, come back, and I was a MMJ, so come back and edit them, put them all together. Walking in, I remember my first day, the funniest thing, Mike Rome, who is the ring announcer for Monday Night Raw, I said, hey, what time should I be there on my first day? I'll get there at 8, 9. He's like, get there at 11 or 12. And I was like, okay. So immediately I was like, these things are a little bit different here at WWE. but we all work obviously the long days and the long weekends. I know one of the first things that I was told is, even if you don't know anybody, you walk up to them, you tell them who you are, and you shake their hand. And that was really weird for me in the very beginning, because I'm this new, timid, young girl that no one cares about, and I'm going up to some of our top guys and sticking out my hand and telling them who I am. But that is just a huge cultural thing with WWE, and honestly, it helps in other facets of life as well. I think it's very important to make it known who you are. People remember that. Just getting used to being on the road with all of these people, knowing how to respect them. And as someone who doesn't come from wrestling and knew nothing about it, doing my research and, showing them that I care, that I'm here, even though I don't come from this world. Because people pick up real quickly, whether you work for WWE or you are a diehard fan of WWE, they can pick up really quickly if you don't care about the product, and then they will dismiss you. So in news, you can kind of fake it till you make it. You figure out your stories the day of, you put it out there, and then it's kind of done. Here you are completely invested. Your body is now one with the WWE.
No, you mentioned the handshakes and everything. It's about respect at the end of the day, because it's not just the camera guy or the lighting guy or the guys in the ring or whatever, but it's the people who paved the way before you, and it's a long tradition in WWE and the wrestling business altogether. I remember Mark Henry telling me after a show one time, "Thank you," and I was like, I did 2 minutes of work tonight. And I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And this was my early days and everything. I was like, why is he thanking me? And then I see everybody saying, thank you, because we all work together to get this thing off the ground. And it is a family. Stone Cold Steve Austin said it on Monday Night Raw, and he's not lying. It's one big family, because we do spend a lot of time on the road. We do spend a lot of time away from our families. And it's that type of respect for each other that has to come first, and that it is genuine gratitude and appreciation that follows.
And when you see people like Mark Henry, who is a legend around here, and in the female locker room, Natalya, she's wrestling royalty. And I remember she was one of the first women I met, and I was a little intimidated by her because of Total Divas, and knowing that she is wrestling royalty.
Well, her cats are terrifying.
Her cat, I didn't want to cross her cats. She was one of the first women to come up to me and genuinely be interested in who I was, and sit with me and kind of teach me the ways. And when you see that, it makes you realize, okay, remember, we have to be humble. This is not about us. If someone like Natalya and Mark Henry can come up to us and say thank you, we really have to work, kind of go overboard to make sure we show them the same respect.
I think with all good companies, that starts at the top. And the first day we shot the first episode of Edge and Christian, we did it with Mr. McMahon. And
easy introduction.
Yes, exactly. Hello, sir. Nice to see you, sir. But the room, obviously, everybody's at attention now when Vince arrives. But he's as gracious. He'd never met me, and I introduced myself, and he talked to me like he would have talked to pretty much most people who walked in the door that day.
Well, what's the old adage? You treat the janitor the way you would the CEO and everything. So I completely agree with that, to the point I was saying before. Mark Henry could have just walked right past me. I was nobody in the grand scheme of our company and everything. I don't mean all that much and everything. So for that to come from Vince all the way down, he truly believes that, and he puts it into practice every single day.
So you're in the doors now, you're starting to work, and I've told our students multiple times, in most places they will get far more feedback here than they ever will out there. I think WWE is a little bit different. So how did you start kind of cultivating your persona through the feedback that you were being provided?
As far as provided by the company and by me. Well, when I came in, I was at NXT, and I was a backstage interviewer, and then I transitioned into a ring announcer for NXT, and then into a backstage interviewer for Smackdown Live, where I am now. Michael Cole our boss is really hands-on with kind of molding us into who he sees, where he sees our potential going. Ring announcing. Which is where I thought that I was going to end up initially, which was fine, is probably one of the, I don't know if anyone in here has ever attempted ring announcing. I know a couple of you have. It's one of those things, if you've never done it, it is one of the most terrifying things you could possibly do, especially if you're not used to using your vocals that way and being super... what's the word?
It's big.
Big. I'll say extra, but big.
So why is it so terrifying?
I guess it's more out of my comfort zone. Again, coming from in studio work or being out in the field and kind of being like, Kayla Beck, Beck, whatever my name is. I don't even know. And then being in a ring, and again, if those of you who want to be on television, there's one way. You're looking into a camera and you're talking to the people who are at home versus being in the middle of a ring in Madison Square Garden with, thousands and thousands of people and having to make every single person in that room feel like they're that one person watching you at home. So just really learning how to do that. But I will say, and I've told our interns, when you master that ability, the ring announcing, the live hosting, you can literally do anything in this field, anything.
How long did it take until you felt like you mastered it?
Have I mastered it?
Well, you don't do any ring announcing anymore. You're very busy backstage. But no, when you were a ring announcer and everything, I remember the first takeover you did. I think it was New Orleans. I think it might have been WrestleMania weekend, so like no pressure whatsoever. And you came to it, and you're like, "Oh, I'm so nervous." And it's like you'd been doing a great job at the NXT TV tapings right across the way here. And then it was funny. I was like, "I knew you were going to do great. You went out and you killed it." And then the next one out and everything, I was like, "Oh yeah, I got this and everything." So you took to it very, very quickly. And then it was really cool to see. Alicia Taylor is now the lead ring announcer on NXT, and it's kind of a mantle that's been passed from person to person. And the way that you set her up for success and everything. You can't do that if you don't have success yourself. So I thought you nailed it.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
What were the early days at WWE like for you as far as your progression and trying to figure out your abilities and capabilities?
It was peculiar because again I was 23. I came in with a lot of preconceived notions. I think about I was very naive. I was very stubborn. I was like, oh, they really like what I put on tape. They want that guy, and it's like yes and no and everything. They see the pedigree and they want to you said with Cole seeing a vision for what you can be. Here's how you apply that and everything. So it took me a while. And the first couple of years I was living close to Stamford, Connecticut and everything. So I was working out of the studio. I've told this story before, but I'd never used a prompter before that opportunity and everything. So I go in, I'm working with Renee Young, who's a pro, did Aftermath in Canada and everything before coming to us. And I was like, hi, can you help me with this? What am I supposed to do? And it's like, don't move your eyes or anything. Just keep it going. Where do I put my hands? Ricky Bobby and everything. So it was really helpful. But that was the beginning. And then once a month, I'd fly down to come do NXT. And we were just beginning here at Full Sail. And at the time, again, in its infancy, really, in terms of the newer version of NXT, it had begun in Tampa and everything and progressed here to Orlando. So I would fly down and I was kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing today or anything. They'd be like, okay, you have one episode or you have two episodes or you have 4 episodes or you have no episodes. It wasn't quite sure what I was going to get sometimes. So coming down here and just trying to learn everything that I saw. And then at one point I moved down here to Orlando, Florida to work out of the Performance Center full time. And it was doing that. It was doing live events to Kayla's point is that if you're not learning I don't want to say smaller roles or anything, but again, ring announcing, backstage interviewing, live event hosting, and everything. Those are critical. And we do more shows that aren't televised than are televised. So if you learn how to do that, you become so much more valuable. And that really, really helped me kind of find my voice because in my personal life, I'm very sarcastic, a very dry sense of humor and everything. So it's like that doesn't come across on TV. And if you do that, you sound like a jerk on TV when you do something like that. So doing live events, talking one-on-one with an audience, and then blowing that up to, all right, look in the camera, or to your point, there's nothing more terrifying but also gratifying to do what we call like a championship ring announcement and everything, to be standing in the middle of that ring between champion and challenger, having all eyes on you in the building, people watching at home around the world. That is a pressure-packed moment. And people are just like, oh, you're just saying his hometown, his weight, and his name and everything. Yeah, but if that doesn't match the moment, it doesn't matter. So there's a lot of different things that come with it.
So some of our interns know this, and I should point out for those online who aren't aware, we have an internship program here at the school with the WWE at the Performance Center a couple miles from here. It's a great honor for us to be able to do this and a wonderful feather to have in our cap, and it's been a great relationship between WWE and the school for many years now. But give us a couple of the 3 most important things to be able to do as a ring announcer, and kind of walk us through the what we might not know about that job, the requirements. I've heard you explain to the students a little bit some of the things that they have to go through.
I think one thing you have to do, and it's easier said than done, we can admit that, but when you walk into the middle of the ring, you sit in a commentary booth, or you get ready to do a backstage interview, you have to be confident. So I think just, being sure of yourself, what you're about to say and what you're about to do. Because the moment that confidence kind of withers, everyone around you can see that it's down, and then you're not believable anymore. And a big part of what we do is making sure that what we're saying and doing is completely believable 100%. So I think that's one to start with.
Adaptability, period. Like, if you can't pivot and adjust on the fly, ring announcing, it's extraordinarily difficult, because there'll be instances where it's like, hey, we're going back up on TV in 15 seconds. We need you to plug this match for later in the night for the audience to know, so they get excited about it and everything. So they may give you like 3 words, and you've got to turn that into a 15-second sell. And we've done some of that stuff with our interns in terms of like, okay, this is the scenario that you might get put in and everything. So if you can't pivot in 15 seconds or something or less, you're dead in the water. And again, you've got the entire building watching, the entire company watching, and all that stuff. So it's really, really challenging to be able to do that. But adaptability, far and away.
There's a story based on adaptability. Oh, there we are. I was hosting a live show out in the Northwest this past year, and it was snowing. The weather was pretty bad.
Was that Yakima?
Yakima, or one of those.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, and so all of the talent, including myself, were trying to make it to the show in the snow. So once we get there, but we're trickling in. The doors are open, fans are there ready for a show. We have 3 matches that are able to happen at this point because talent are still trying to get to the building, and I'm the ring announcer, so I have no idea what's going to happen. So we have earpieces. That card was not made finish until the last match, and so it's being able to, like, all right, the producer, all right, Kayla, Samoa Joe just walked in the building and his opponent is TBD. I'm like, great. Where's TBD from? How much does he weigh?
Parts unknown.
So like that, just being able to adapt, and just you have to be ready for anything. You cannot get comfortable. Like, you can't get comfortable. But it also is so rewarding, like you said, when the show is done and you say your goodnight, the show went better than you expected, all the superstars are happy and the fans are happy. So there's definitely a payoff, but adaptability, that's probably one of the biggest ones.
So at ESPN, we had ESPN News as kind of our, you just started here, we're going to put you on these shows, there's not quite as much pressure. What is the value of NXT as a training ground for the broadcasters?
It's tremendous, and I talk about this all the time, is that we're not like those bigger networks and everything like that. While we work with them, we don't have 24/7 live television and everything. So while ESPN, they may put a new guy on TV or something, and for instance, they put him on ESPN News and just reps. We don't necessarily do that because we churn out our TV in a 2-day time frame and everything. So what we do is, again, working heavily at the Performance Center, doing our best to improvise and come up with mock scenarios, and working with each other to try and get better for those situations. NXT, because it is a tape show and everything outside of takeover events, it gives us the opportunity to, for lack of a better term, it gives us the opportunity as broadcasters to fail. And that's okay, because again, it's a post-produced show. We can go back and fix it if we need to. We can do edits and all that, which is really good. But it gives you the opportunity to learn on the fly and eventually get you to a point where it's like, okay, you can do this as if it's live, and then we put you in a live environment. It doesn't seem that big. And that wasn't always the case in WWE. There have been plenty of times where they take a broadcaster and they put them right on Monday Night Raw, or right on SmackDown Live. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You're really getting thrown in the deep end. NXT is the perfect training ground for our producers, cameramen, lighting guys, broadcasters, in-ring talent. It's developmental and everything. They're learning quite a bit, but it's turned into this massive worldwide brand now. So while there is a chance to learn, we have to deliver at the same time.
At some point, though, you're going to go from NXT, which houses about 500 people, to a venue somewhere with 15,000 people in it. Do you remember what was the first time you had to do that, and what did you feel like?
Actually, back up. We start doing armories around Florida where there might be as many people who are in this room right now. My very first one of those, I was terrified. I got in the ring, and we start with, the following contest is scheduled for one fall. I got into the ring and said, the following is the fall. But it was so great. the NXT fans here in Florida they're really gracious, and they recognize that there's someone new, and they actually all together said for me, the following contest is scheduled. And it was a great moment, though, and another moment that I was starting to fall in love with WWE. But those crowds are small. And the first time I did an NXT road tour, we do those too. NXT goes on the road and performs for bigger venues. Mike Rome accompanied me on my very first one. I think it was in Nashville, Tennessee, which was really cool because that's where I came from. And we walked in, and I looked at him. I said, I got to go back to the I forgot something. Like, I did not want to do it. My heart just sunk because that's more people. But you get through that hurdle. And then when you start doing WWE Live, it gets a little bit easier. Then you do the takeovers and it gets a little bit easier. And the cool thing about starting in these smaller venues and slowly building is you're also slowly building who you are as an announcer, and you're building your confidence even more. So by the time you get there, and then our team is so encouraging of each other too. Like, Tom has been one of my biggest cheerleaders and supporters since I got here. So, and I don't say this to you, but anytime you give me a compliment or a thumbs up, it really means a lot to me and gives me even more confidence, even if you're not telling the truth. But so yeah,
we just had a moment. That was nice.
We don't have many of those.
That was really nice. Aw.
As a backstage interviewer, Jonathan Coachman, I worked with at ESPN, and he had a great rapport with The Rock. I imagine most people could have a good rapport with The Rock in that scenario.
Hard not to.
Yes. But there's a level of pressure on you to sell what they're selling in the moment. So what were those challenges like for you when you had to start interacting with wrestlers backstage in that way to try to make sure that what they wanted to deliver was being delivered in part by your performance?
Well, this question was asked to me recently, and I think I've become, and all of us are so invested. So there are times we're doing backstage interviews, and I'm legitimately so excited and kind of fangirling out, and it's completely genuine. And so I know that is, the people who are watching are seeing that. So I think that's really it, just staying in it, being, passionate and respectful, and understanding that, these superstars have worked, some of them, their whole lives in order to be seen on the Mondays and Tuesdays on the USA Network, and what they have to say is extremely important. And so, honestly, it's not really that hard to portray that, for me anyway.
You mentioned The Rock. One of the most challenging interviews I ever had to do was Roman Reigns wins the Royal Rumble match, 2016, I think. Anybody? 2016? Yeah.
Seth?
15, 16, I can't remember the year. So they had me do an impromptu interview that, again, Roman and The Rock didn't know about and everything. It was just kind of, I think it was a network exclusive. So they sent me back there, and I had no earpiece or anything. I had no information. They were like, just go interview him. And I was like, okay, and everything. It's just
This was in Philly, right?
This was in Philadelphia.
And
Greatest city in the
Roman's
world.
win didn't necessarily go over great with the.
There was
the
a
crowd.
mixed reaction and everything, and so it was a really interesting kind of scenario because of how the reaction went. Obviously, Roman is on cloud 9 because he's going to WrestleMania. We don't see The Rock very often, so you come up and you're naturally just jacked up off of that situation. So then I have to go to them and interview them, and I have no idea what to ask, and they're clearly kind of like, what are you doing here? Like, this wasn't supposed to happen. And I'm asking him questions, and it's The Rock. So I'm laughing at some of the stuff he's just running me down as he normally does and everything. Like, that was his shtick when he was with us for a while. So I'm just like, I'm interviewing The Rock. So this is awesome. And I'm like, yeah, make fun of me all you want, man. Like, come on, bring it. And he's roasting me, and then Roman gets a word in or something like that. But literally trying to be in that moment, enjoy it. And then at the same time, like, I need to come up with an intelligent question here. So it was not easy, but there's nothing else like it. It's so much fun.
Yeah, the thinking on your feet that you talked about.
Oh, yeah.
So as a former regular sports play-by-play guy, you come to WWE. What are the big differences between doing a football game and doing a wrestling match?
I think there's a misconception sometimes about WWE commentary versus conventional sports in that, gosh, it's so different. It is and it isn't, in that, wrestling there's nothing else quite like it. But, when you turn on TV and you see, Joe Buck or it's Chris Fowler or something like that, they're calling a slant pattern and a corner route and everything. I'm calling a drop kick and a clothesline. It's the same thing, just different verbiage and a different kind of atmosphere. Because again, what happens, use football as for instance, all right? But from the snap to the end of the play, it's like, here's the throw and incompletion, by Eli Manning. So it's like, oh, okay, that's the end of the play. So what are you doing for the next 25 seconds? You either get your analyst involved so he can explain maybe what happened, go over a replay and tell you the story of what the play was real quick, or you've got a quick note about what's going on with that person. For instance, Odell Beckham, he makes a catch for the Browns in, whatever week it is. And it's like, okay, yeah, like crazy offseason for Odell Beckham and everything, getting traded from the New York Giants, and all of a sudden huge expectations for the Browns. Will he live up to it? Okay, well, we do the same thing during a wrestling match in that, okay, here's the bell, here's what's going on with Kofi Kingston, boom, and a drop kick and everything, and here's more of his story, and there's 11 years to this point and all that. So we're doing the same job, a lot more amped up, a lot more amplified, just with energy, because our guys are, in there getting really physical. Not that they aren't in other sports, but it's just a completely different animal in terms of energy and enthusiasm. It's over the top, but it works for our world.
Mauro Ranallo.
Mauro Ranallo, yes.
Example.
Over the top.
I think one of the great things that Jim Nantz has done with his career is adapt to Tony Romo. Because as a play-by-play guy, you want to set the scene and be a storyteller. And Tony Romo is screaming out what the play is going to be as the guy comes to the line of scrimmage.
It's amazing.
Totally eliminates Jim Nantz's ability to set the scene.
Yep.
But he made that adaptation, and it's worked very well. You've had, I don't want to say a revolving door, but you've had a handful of different people you've had to work with on SmackDown, and you work with a big personality in Corey, and you work with Byron, who's relatively humble, I think, but wants to put himself out there and get his words in. So how do you strike that balance?
I'll use this past Tuesday, for instance. We were promoting that Shawn Michaels was going to be on commentary. No big deal. Two-time Hall of Famer, so I do all my prep for that, and then he winds up being the special guest on Miz TV, so I'm not going to do commentary. So we kick off the show, and New Day is dancing on the desk, and it's Biggie and Xavier Woods right in my face, and it's like they're on commentary for the first half of the show, plus David Otunga is here, and then Michael Cole joined us for the second hour of the show. So that was just this past Tuesday. So having Corey and Byron on a regular basis is wonderful. They're two consummate professionals and two of the best broadcasters I've ever gotten to work with. But to your point, Michael Cole has always said to me, he's like, if you can work with anybody and make that person look good, your money. And it's difficult. It's not easy. There's some people that you go out there and you might not have chemistry with. I remember the first show I called with Nigel McGuinness, and I was kind of like, oh man, I don't know Nigel. I hope this goes well. And it just after a couple minutes, I was like, yeah, it's like riding a bike. There's other people where it's like, okay, this doesn't quite click, and we might not be, great friends or something, but you find a way and you just make it work. I was lucky to work with Jerry the King Lawler and JBL and Booker T, Jimmy Uso. It's a laundry list of people and everything. But yeah, King and JBL especially really helped me because they were pros.
How did they help you?
King especially is the best at, and it's challenging in broadcasting, and I say it like this, in filling the small moments. And he can obviously hit a home run with the big moments, and he's funny and he's witty, and he can perform, and he can give you the emotion of the moment. But it's filling those little moments where it's like, hey, there's like 3 to 5 seconds of what could potentially be dead air, and he just has the perfect filler, whether it's a sentence or a word or just a or something like that. He is the best at that. Then and again, he's done everything in the history of the business, so it's like I can ask him anything. JBL was amazing because I treat him I got to treat him in a different way because he was such an over the top bad guy on our TV that we had a very different relationship in that way on TV. And then off camera and everything, he was good to me. He was tough on me, which I needed. I needed at the time. I was young and stubborn, like I said before, probably still am. And JBL was amazing in that he's a Rolodex. He can walk into a building and tell you what year he was here, who he wrestled against, what the main event was, what the house was, what the address is and everything. Is unbelievable information. And then this crazy over-the-top character at the same time that you could really sink your teeth into. So they're the best.
Kayla, what were some of the early challenges or struggles that you had in your broadcasting career that you still kind of make sure to stay on top of today?
Well, I got in my career so early, just kind of how Tom did, and coming from the digital YouTube world. And so when I first got hired at West 2 News, I didn't know, this is bad, because back then, Belmont Broadcast Department was kind of old. And I did a lot of print media back then, actually. Now their department is incredible. But, like, I had to learn basic terms like VOSAT when I started at WESH. Like, stuff like that just wasn't common terms that I used a lot in college. And then having to pretend amongst all of these vets of the news business that I knew what I was doing. So they would say something to me, I'm like, uh-huh. And then I'd Google it. And that was kind of how I got through WESH. And then it was hard I got looked at a lot back then because I was 22 when I started at WESH. People weren't necessarily that welcoming in the beginning because it's a top 20 market, and some kid out of college who doesn't know what a VOSAT is working here. Eventually, I earned my respect because I worked really hard, but that kind of started over again at WWE because I came in as a girl who did not know wrestling at all and did not know anything about ring announcing and, didn't know even some of the bigger names in wrestling. So once again, people pick up on that really quickly. And so between WESH and WWE, and this is just something all of us can learn and use through life, is do your research. Like, don't go into something, if you have a job or an internship or whatever it may be, even if you're not interested necessarily or have a background in it, do your research because it is so disrespectful and you will not get a job long term in that area if you do not do so. So I think it just really taught me how to stay on top of it.
And that's not an uncommon experience. I mean, people at ESPN would come in with 15, 20 years of experience in the business, but they never worked a day at ESPN. So a lot of people in the building would be like, well, show me what you can do here. And I think that culture changed over time because we started realizing that's a stupid way to look at people. But I remember very early I was doing a show with Craig Kilborn, and we're having a show meeting, and we didn't really have a lead story. And so we just kind of talked about what it might be. And as the meeting was wrapping up, Craig said, well, we'll just read and react. But I took it, I don't even know why, like he was being sarcastic and kind of like diminishing me. I didn't even know what the term really meant, the way I'd never heard it used in that way before. So I was like, no, we're not going to just read and react. We're going to, and he's looking at me like, what the hell is your problem? But similarly to VOSAT, I remember B-roll for the longest time. People were talking about B-roll, and I'm like, is that like on the shelf? Where do I find B-roll? Yeah. How about for you, Tom? What are some of the things that maybe you try to be mindful of that were challenges early in your career?
It's the littlest thing can change the complexion of a story, and it's one word can change a sentence and can change a moment and can change a story. So we're very careful about the way we phrase things. I remember calling one match and saying a guy stole the championship, and well, no, he didn't. He won it fair and square and everything. He didn't cheat, so he took the championship from whomever. So there's just different ways to phrase our stories that, again, if you miss on one word or if you do hit that one word, it completely changes the perspective of the whole thing. So that took a while to really be able to do that, not just sit there or even write it out for a line or throw to a package or something like that, but to be able to sit there and react in the moment and have that filter in your head of like, this is how this needs to come out so it makes sense.
What's your self-evaluation process now?
I usually hate myself for a day after the show, and then I move on with my life. So my wife is great in that she's like, give yourself 24 hours and move on with your life and watch back the tape and all that stuff. So there's some weeks where things feel really, really good, and there's some weeks where things feel a little clunky sometimes, and I'm still finding my footing. I'm 30 years old. I've been doing this now for almost 7 years and everything. So I still have ways to go, and I try not to get frustrated with myself because I'm holding myself to, Michael Cole's on Monday and I'm on Tuesday. I'm like, I've got to try and match him. Well, he's been with our company for 22 years and he's a consummate professional broadcaster. So how do I get to that level each and every week, or at least take a step in the right direction? So that big thought, and then, okay, going to the micro of the show and everything and making sure, let's get through segment 1, let's get through segment 2, and just one thing at a time, and then stepping back and looking at the big picture.
So sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you said that, it's very easy to compare to those who have been here forever because you want to be Michael Cole or be as good as Michael Cole. I would like to be on the Renee Young level. And something I have to, and anybody in this industry understands, we are so in our heads all the time. We do one little mess up that no one else knows that we did, and then it messes us up again because we stay in that moment. I do it every week. But a saying I have to say in my head a lot is, I think John Acuff, who's an author, but he said, never compare your beginning to somebody else's middle, because all that's going to do is trip you up consistently. So I think just keeping that mindset, and that's huge in what we do, because you want to be the best, and you will get there.
Well, that's an awesome job of setting me up for my next question, which is, so you get there, and we talk about finding your voice as a sportscaster in our program all the time. How do you find your voice as Tom Phillips and not the next Michael Cole, not the next Vince McMahon?
No, and it's challenging because my example every single week is Michael Cole, and it has been for 7 years. So naturally, I get people on Twitter saying you sound exactly like Michael Cole, and that's tone of voice. That's saying we have a similar sounding voice, so that's part of it. And then at the same time, I'm using a lot of the same rhythms that he does because I see that it works, and I see how it works for WWE and how they want their broadcasts done. So it's like, oh, okay, so this is the example. And he is the best at coming to me and be like, don't say that word, say this word, get this out of your vocabulary because I do that, and it makes all the sense in the world. So Cole, for instance, when Roman Reigns comes out, here comes the big dog. So you will almost never hear me say that in Roman's entrance, even though I've heard it for almost 6 years now straight every time Roman was coming out as a singles competitor. That's what Cole does. So it's like, okay, that's great. That's his thing. I've got to find my thing. If he has one word that he uses to describe this guy's effort or something like that, I've got to have 6 other different ones. So while he is the model of what we try to do in terms of play-by-play announcing, I have to take that structure and then fill it in with my own spin on things. And it takes some time.
And it must be weird, too, because, we have aspiring sportscasters, and maybe they want to be the next Dan Patrick or whoever, but they're not often, they'll get feedback from Dan here, but not so much maybe when you are getting feedback from the person you're trying not to be. Yeah. So what are those conversations like when he's giving you that feedback?
They're excellent because sometimes they'll happen in the moment on a broadcast. So for me, it really helps. I need to go out. My personality has always been I need to go out and do it and fail and learn in that situation. So I had some instances this past Tuesday where he's sitting right next to me. So again, no pressure or anything. And one instance, I can't remember what it was, and I was like, I flubbed that. And he was like, instead of trying this, do this and everything. So it's like, oh, okay. So you have to understand there's situations where it's high pressure or something like that. There's never anything personal about it. It's just a different opinion, but it's also just trying to point you in the right direction, just to try and help you find your feet. So it doesn't sound just like him or like Vic Joseph or Mauro Ranallo and everything. We're always trying to separate ourselves from each other. So it's really, really good.
What's been the finding your voice experience been like for you?
I think I was encouraged very early to have my own personality. As an entertainment travel host, I was like, all over the place all the time. And I tried to kind of suffocate that a little bit when I got here. And Michael Cole was like, no, like that's who we hired. That's who we want on TV. And it took me a bit because when I was new and I was trying to do these backstage interviews and be professional and be who I thought I was supposed to be based on previous backstage interviewers, Cole kept saying, we're waiting to see Kayla. Like, we want to see Kayla. Vince McMahon wants to see Kayla. Vince McMahon saw your reel back when we hired you. That's what he's waiting to see. I think just now in the last, 9 months to a year, maybe less, Cole's like, she's here. Like, we finally see Kayla. And it's great because, backstage, the producers allow that personality to come out. I'm really sarcastic on Twitter. I think I'm way funnier than I am. But they...
No, you're hysterical.
But Michael Cole and some people who work back, say they see that and they think it's hilarious. And Cole came up to me a couple weeks ago and goes, we want you to be a little more sarcastic on TV. And even with the superstars, we have that rapport now. And it really makes me more comfortable and confident when I'm going in to do a backstage interview because I know I'm not trying to pretend to be someone that I'm aspiring to be. I get to just be Kayla. So it helps.
Social media is an interesting place, and I think it's had a large impact on your industry. Probably first and foremost with storytelling, because the superstars can now use that platform to engage with each other. So how have you seen social media impact the business?
I mean, it's the cornerstone of what we do in that we have entire storylines sometimes that start from social media or continue on social media. So much of, for instance, Becky Lynch's rise in the last year. You can go back and go through her social media and everything and see the genesis of it. So that's a really cool thing that for that audience that is on social media, and again, we always try and put it into perspective. Okay, this is not a small sample and everything, but of who's actually tuning in and watching Raw and SmackDown, but it's still a big group of people. And what is their thought and what is their process? How are they taking in the product? So for our talent to be able to go and, oh, let me put this out there and see what the reaction is and everything, it's a fantastic barometer. So for us, it's different in that we like to promote shows or promote what we're doing next or something like that. But for the talent, it's a lot of times when there's limited opportunities on TV, that's your avenue to get yourself exposure to the people that you want to see you.
And I feel like the WWE universe is like probably the most interactive fan base on social
far and
media.
away.
Like I've never seen anything like it. I have friends who are outside of WWE but in other entertainment industries, and they're like, it is insane just the feedback and the reactions that they see the superstars and the announce team get on social media. So they're always watching and wanting to be a part of it. For sure.
How were you received on social media when you first started appearing on shows?
Is that Charlie Caruso? Nobody knew who I was. I mean, it's fine, but it took a while for them to realize that there's actually another dark-haired backstage interviewer. I mean, he was Mike Rome and Tom Phillips.
People still think I'm Mike Rome. Mike Rome goes to live events and they're like, "Oh, hi, Tom Phillips." He's like, "That's not me." So I deal with that every week.
But another example of something that got turned into an entire story on television.
Yeah. That was, and never would have seen that coming. But at the same time, it was so much fun.
Yeah, you were put on on a list, right? Were you?
I think I'm on the list like 4 or 5 times. Like I can, and in different names too. Like I had aliases and everything. So that was fun.
It's fun, yeah.
Social media is kind of a weird focus group where I've been to real focus groups, and people generally, if they don't like something, don't say, "Oh God, this sucks," and "This guy's a moron." On social media, it happens that way, though. So how do you filter that stuff when you're going through your mentions and process that
the
feedback?
the negative feedback? It's taken time. I think, and I mentioned this in a podcast I did recently, I think people behind a computer screen will say whatever they want to us because they think, oh, they're celebrities, it doesn't bother them, and it really still bothers. You know, it does hurt, and it took me a while to like just not look at them or turn my comments off or whatever. And then you always have to realize there's always way more good than bad, but we tend to always want to focus on like the negative comments. I think I'm good. Like it doesn't really bother me as much anymore. But I think again, it was just not focusing on those negative comments because people can be mean on social media and they want to be where we are and on the screens and they're watching. So
it's a different experience for me because my role on TV is more about information than it is about personality, and that's the lot of a play-by-play announcer, regardless of what you're calling. And I'm essentially, I always call it, I'm going for a clean sheet. So if I come back and I look at my Twitter and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, whatever, like I get like 2 or 3 tweets or something like that, I'm like, cool, awesome, that means I had a decent night. But if I miss, again, like I said, one word or something like that. I think this past Tuesday I said, oh, this happened over a year ago. And it's like, you looked at the date wrong, it's less than a year ago. Shows up on Twitter. And I'm like, yep. Didn't have a clean sheet tonight. All right. So they'll call you on stuff like that, and then they'll do some stuff that's not nice and everything. But it's for the most part, it's really cool in that the response, especially if you hit something that, I have a couple instances here and there to get some personality out. And when that lands and you see that on social media, it's like, all right, cool. Like that's getting, appreciated.
Yeah, I really wish Twitter had been around when Bobby the Brain Heenan.
Oh my God!
Around.
Yeah. Well, luckily we have it when Corey Graves.
Well,
was working,
yeah. So, like, I think Corey's done a good job of using social media to elevate who he is as a performer. I don't know that you've had any specific conversations with him about that, but just your thoughts on how he's been able to do that.
Corey is a dear friend, and he, in my opinion, is the best color commentator in sports entertainment walking the planet right now. And he is masterful at manipulation on social media, in that he'll put something maybe cryptic out there or just something that he knows is going to needle you, and it's going to be a polarizing kind of thing. And it's funny to watch him, like we'll be at TV or something like that, and he might come up with something, and it's just to mess with people. And it's just working the marionette and everything, and it's so much fun. And then there's times where he's a very genuine guy and he gets out his real feelings, and there's a lot of different things that he supports in and out of WWE. So it's really cool to see him use that avenue. He's funny, as we all know. He's a hilarious, witty dude, and those things that, for instance, he is the gift of, wit in the moment, snap of a finger. And it was something I just don't have that and everything. So it's amazing to watch him do that on live TV. And then that same thing comes out in 180 characters on stuff on Twitter. So it's really fun.
And he and Byron work very well. In order for Corey to be Corey, Byron has to kind of sit there and take it.
Well, and again, it's part of what we do. Is that first of all, the play-by-play guy is always kind of the straight man and everything. So I'm happy to be a punching bag if that's necessary, because the joke's got to land, and then if you respond and kind of ruin the joke or whatever, it's a moment just like anything else. And I think we've all had conversations with friends, and it's like, oh yeah, that was really funny, and then like there's one other thing, and you're just like, why did you say anything? You should have just shut up or something. So Byron has known Corey for a long time, so he really knows when it's like, okay, you got me that round, and then next segment, I'm going to tag you right back, and he comes around with whatever he's got to do and everything. So it's a very interesting dichotomy.
At a certain point in our program, our students have to start wearing IFBs and get used to people talking in their ear. We talked about traditional play-by-play. You'll have some people get in your ear, let you know.
Just a few.
Right. They'll let you know at a baseball game, hey, here comes a replay, or hey, we should talk about this guy, whatever. It's a little different when you're calling a match. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
So, like I was saying, this past week was very different because Corey and Byron were off. So I had Big E and Xavier Woods. So they're insane, and they're friends. So that was fun. Then David Otunga, who hadn't done commentary in a bit with us and everything. So getting him back into the flow of what we do. Then joined by Michael Cole later in the show. So that's, 4 commentators I worked with that night. And then on top of that, I've got our executive producer. I may have our sound guy or something like that. I may have a writer or something like that with a note or something like that. Our writing staff is great about statistics and all that. And occasionally Mr. McMahon will chime in with something. And the way I look at it is that every once in a while he'll give me a piece of information. And I might not understand it in the moment because he's looking at the macro and I'm looking at the micro, in that I'm looking at what's in front of me on my monitor in this segment. What are we doing now? And he's looking at obviously the much broader scope. It's his baby. So in the moment, there's times where I'm like, oh, I don't get that. And then maybe 2 segments later, I'll be like, oh, okay, I see where you're going with this. And it's, breadcrumbs or whatever. So there's a lot of different voices. It took me a while to get used to it. I'm very grateful I had the opportunity a couple of years ago. It was a 4-man desk with David Otunga, Mauro Ranallo, JBL, and myself. And everybody was like, okay, this looks like The Naked Gun, and it's just too many commentators. And I was sitting on the edge, and I was literally just doing the traffic. And I was doing B-roll, I was throwing the packages, I was doing graphics, ads, and all that stuff. So to be able to sit there and have that time to just do that, and it's like, okay, this is, master this, get used to this, then add, okay, call a match and personality and back and forth and everything. So it was just a lot of different things all at once.
There's no other network in the country where the boss of the bosses is in the ear of an on-air performer.
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
It's like I said, it's pressure, but it's a good thing. It's the old adage about, if the coach isn't talking to you, he doesn't care, or he's given up hope on you or something. So if he's talking to you and if he's giving you something or if he's giving you a critique, it's because he either likes what you do or he sees the potential in what you can do. So I don't see one reason why anybody would shy away from that, because again, the boss of the bosses, as you said, it's Vince McMahon. If he's got something to tell me, I'm all ears.
There are times where your job is more exciting when you're not doing anything, because you're sitting over by the timekeeper and suddenly Braun Strowman comes whipping around the corner, or Big E or something like that. What do those moments feel like when those men are hurtling at you at 15, 20 miles an hour?
I mean, I think we talked about this yesterday. There's a common misconception that we as announcers know what's coming, and we do not. So the reactions and I think people used to tweet at me after shows, like sometimes they'd get so focused on how I was reacting to something that it distracted them from what was going on. I'm like, I'm not trying to distract anyone. Yeah, Braun Strowman is about to land in my lap. They're exciting. Those are the moments by the timekeeper when I'm waiting to get into the ring that I feel like I'm part of the WWE universe, and that's what makes our job so cool. Is yeah, we're professionals. We're doing our jobs. We're doing what we're told to do, but we also get those moments where we get to be fans, right?
So what's a story you can share about an experience where it was a close call or a full impact?
Let's see. Impact. I mean, I've fallen, but not because anybody made me fall. Like I've broken my high heels in the ring and ripped dresses in the rings and have to wear Talent's tennis shoes to the ring.
One of the first live events you and I did together, wasn't it in Jacksonville that you were like, Tom, my dress is ripped.
Oh.
And I was like, then you're not doing the show.
Well,
It's
no.
like, don't worry about it.
Well, there was one where I was walking out at one of my very first NXT live tours. So this was a big crowd. And I was feeling all confident and the camera was following me. And all of a sudden I'm like, I'm walking weird, but I can't figure out why. And I look down and my high heel on one of my shoes had completely broken off. So I'm like, that's fine. We can work with this. I toss it. I keep limping to the ring. I get into the ring. Dress slits down the back. It's like, it's okay. We can work with this. I think whoever was next, I got like a jacket. Ember Moon, of all people, bless her heart, snuck out and handed me like her bright orange tennis shoes to go with my classy dress. But that's another example of how like we're a big family. Everyone is trying to help each other out. If something happens in the ring where there is a close call, that's definitely not intentional towards us. None of them want to hurt us, I don't think.
And in your position, bodies will fly.
A lot of bodies in the area. Randy Orton loves to drop people directly on the desk. So it's one of so when he comes out, I immediately just start tucking things away and handing things to our stage manager. And he's like, what is this? And I was like, Randy's coming down. Like, somebody's going to get killed and everything. It's going to be awesome. I remember, I think we were in London or somewhere in the UK, and Seth Rollins, at the time when he was Mr. Money in the Bank, came over the desk. So his back kind of hit my chest. And because we were in the UK, it's a different setup ringside. So there's probably 2 or 3 less feet between where the desk is and the barrier. So I went boom, boom, right into the wall. And it's like you want to react and everything, but like I literally couldn't move. And it's just bam, just right in my lap. Stephanie McMahon slapped me in the face a couple days before Christmas on Monday Night Raw. So I'm on that list. So that's great. Trying to think. There's a lot of other. I remember doing a house show in Poughkeepsie, New York, and the Revival were intentionally just messing with me the whole match to the point that like Dash Wilder just literally fell into my lap, and the chair was not really that sturdy to begin with. So the chair just collapses. So I'm just sitting in a heap with like my leg over the chair and like the bell next to me and everything. And they're looking at me like, what happened? I was like, you happened, So that's a regular basis.
The guys get a lot worse than we girls do.
Oh yeah, it's totally different.
There's a lot of travel involved in your job. I could never do it. One, I don't like to fly. 2, I just wouldn't want to be on the road. You guys must wake up and have no idea where you are some days. What's the adjustment to the travel been like for you?
I think I'm personally just an autopilot. Like I'm more comfortable in a hotel room in an airport than I almost am in my own home. And that's just kind of where it's gotten, because I'll fly out on a Monday, typically come home on a Wednesday. If I have house shows, fly back out that Friday or Saturday. So I think I'm at a point now where I'm just so used to it. It really, like someone mentioned yesterday, maybe it was Greg or one of our social media guys, who was like, man, like it was so nice to be in my own bed. I'm like, I don't really even know the difference anymore, to be honest.
I made an investment in my mattress and everything. It was one of the best things I ever spent my money on. So when I come home, I'm like, oh, this is perfect.
And he has a new puppy that he gets to snuggle with too.
So it's right now I'm sleeping better on the road than I am at home. So thank you for taking care of the dog, honey. She's been sick the last couple of days. No, it's I have a different schedule in that most weeks I fly out Monday, I'm back on Wednesday, so it's not as taxing as something that like Kayla or some of our live event hosts will go through. So I'm fortunate. I'm not going to complain about that at all. But I grew up with my dad working a ton of hours. He was a hospital administrator in Philadelphia. He would work. I wouldn't see him in the morning and everything. Like he'd be like in and out the door and all that stuff. And then I'd see him at dinner, and that was pretty much it. And then at one point, we were living in Connecticut, and he got a job at NYU, and he would travel from where we were living in Connecticut to Katona, New York, take the train, go into the city. So a 3-hour commute in the morning and a 3-hour commute in the evening. He did that for, I want to say 3-4 years every day. And eventually, got an apartment in the city, and just to make it a little bit easier during the week. He had a similar situation with a job in Boston late in his life, late in his career. Excuse me, Dad's still alive. Sorry, Dad. But it was so I got to a point where I was like, if he's going to do that, sorry, if he's going to do that for all of us, then yeah, next.
Yeah, you do the math. 3 hours on the train each way. That's 1 month out of your year. You're sitting on a train.
Oh yeah, 6 hours a day and everything. So yeah, if he was happy to do that for all of us and everything, then I can get on a plane a couple hours out of the week. That's fine.
I'm going to use this opportunity then to pivot. Inspirational people in your life who've encouraged you to help you get from where you hoped to be someday to where you are now. You don't have to cry though.
Oh,
Bail me out, Kayla.
some of you may know my story, some of you may not, but I grew up in foster care. And so when I was 9 years old, I moved into a foster family. Prior to that, I had no idea, or there was nothing I was passionate about, didn't think I was going to become anything. My foster parents actually are hired by, he's now passed, but the founder of Chick-fil-A, Truett Cathy, has foster homes called Windshape Homes. They're still around. There's 12 of them in the Southeast. And I was placed in one of those. So when I told you I was a public speaking nerd at a young age, he got wind of it, that one of his foster kids liked to public speak, and he was getting older, and he had all of these book launches and business luncheons, and he wanted one of his foster kids to go with him and speak on his behalf. And so that was me all growing up. And then that just was the first time between he and my foster parents that I felt like I could be someone and that I was good at something. The first public speech I ever did, I didn't tell anyone I was doing it, didn't tell my foster parents because I didn't want to disappoint them, and I won. And it was like a Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory situation where I got my purple ribbon and I got off the school bus and I'm running in slow motion. I won, and my parents were like, "Great job, what'd you win?" But I remember that moment, how proud they were, and I never felt that as a kid, that someone was super proud of me, and I was like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And that's kind of what catapulted me into broadcast. So
I've told this story, some of these students have heard this before, but in 2000, I was working on Baseball Tonight, and the Mets and Yankees made the World Series. And my father grew up a Brooklyn Dodgers fan and had seen Dodgers-Yankees World Series, Subway Series. I never thought in my lifetime the Mets and Yankees would play a Subway Series. So I'm on the field before game one, 10 feet from the batting cage, and I call my dad, and I said, guess where I am now? And thank you for making me a baseball fan. That was my, I really made it kind of moment. What was your I've made it moment to this point?
I mean, when my career when I started at WESH, honestly, that was my first, I am working in a top 20 TV market, hosting my own show. How the heck did this happen? From being a girl who was, again, shooting her own videos on a horrible camera and editing them on iMovie. I think that was a moment. I think that was the moment I was like, I'm going to make it. I can do this. WWE really increased that because now we're on I'm on national television now.
Global television.
And 28 years old. So, that is also really encouraging. And I think it just makes me really pumped up to see what's to come. I mean, Tom and I are two of the youngest broadcasters in WWE. I mean, we are the two youngest.
I think you're right.
We are. Everyone else is,
super old.
Super old, you guys. And so, that's super encouraging. And,
What was your I've made it moment?
I don't know if I'd call it I've made it, but just kind of a pinch me moment or something like that. I mentioned interviewing The Rock. That was very surreal. But the first WrestleMania I got to do, I wasn't expecting to do it in that Mauro Ranallo was the play-by-play guy leading up to it and everything, and I got the opportunity literally within a couple weeks before WrestleMania. They were like, you're calling WrestleMania. I was like, what? So Corey Graves and I called the Cruiserweight Championship match on the kickoff show. This is WrestleMania 33 right here in Orlando. And
Crowd pop.
Thank you, Mick Foley. So I don't know if any of you went to the show or saw the show. The ramp was enormous. Like, I want to say 70 yards maybe or something. I can't recall. But they were like, it wasn't a situation where they just had us kind of go below the hard cam or whatever, just walk out to the desk. They're like, no, go to Gorilla and go out down the ramp. Okay. So you walk out, and it's Camping World Stadium is pretty big, and you're on this ramp, and it's just this sea of people. And it's like you're standing on like the hull of the Titanic on this ramp. And I'm walking down the ramp with Graves, who I'm so glad I got to call that first match to get the jitters out a little bit, and that I got to call it with him, one of my best friends. But walking down that ramp with him was so special. And at the same time, I was like, I'm going to call WrestleMania right now. I have the picture, and it's just like a blip on the map. So I don't know if I call that an I've made it moment. I guess you could, but it was just a pinch me moment.
I was going to say, probably tempted to hold Corey's hand to make sure neither one of you
Hold my hand, man.
That would have been adorable.
Well, I just didn't want to fall off the thing. You
Right,
know,
exactly.
like,
That's what I meant. Yeah. For anybody here who wants to ask a question, we've got a microphone right here. So why don't you guys start lining up? In the meantime, going back to travel, best, worst, funniest, couldn't make a show kind of travel story.
I mean, honestly, the story I kind of told earlier in the snowstorm. I didn't see snow for the first time until I was like 12 years old. So and now I live in Florida. So we are not used to snow here in Florida. So I'm driving, like I just think this is it. This is gonna be it. And a cop pulls me over, and he's like, "Where are you from, honey?" I said, "Florida," and he just starts dying laughing.
best answer you could. I'd use that every time.
And so obviously he helped me get there. That was probably like the worst travel story. Everyone was safe. Everyone was fine. I don't know. We go to so many really cool places. So many cool places. I think the best part about my job is the fact that I get to see all these places that I would never see anywhere else.
I had an instance where I was vacationing in a remote town in Maine, and we had to go to a show in Toronto. So I was going to fly there. I think it was a pay-per-view, so I think I was flying there on a Saturday. And the flight that I booked was close to the Bangor airport. So it was Bangor to Philly, Philly to Toronto to connect. And there was this huge storm that was making its way towards Philly, and I'm like, I'm going to fly to Philly. I'm going to get stuck in Philly, and then either have to drive or something like that. So I looked at the map, and it was 11 hours. Okay. So I called travel. I was like, get me a car out of the Bangor airport. So I drove 11 hours from Bangor to Toronto through Quebec cow country and everything. And because, again, I didn't have the international plan on my phone, so I just was radio silent to my wife.
How's the radio in cow country, Quebec?
Right, for like 11 hours. And I couldn't really use my phone because it was in like airplane mode. So I had like a GPS that was in French, and I'm like, I have no idea where I'm going. So I'm like really hoping I make it. So of course, like you don't show up to the building and like, I drove 11 hours to get here or something. So I just showed up and went to work and everything. And people will ask you in passing, it was like, oh, that was your travel. I heard this and everything. I was like, oh, I drove 11 hours to get here. Something.
Because everyone had a crazy travel.
Everybody's
day.
done
So like,
that.
You can never walk to work and be like, oh, guess what I went through today. Like
Right, but everybody has a million of stories like that.
And it's amazing to me that all the travel you do and how dependent you are to get to where you need to be, that it doesn't happen more that people miss a show.
It's that, and then it's also a mentality of the old saying in wrestling is you make the shot, you make the town, you make the show, period. So we don't really have a lot of sympathy for some people where they'll be like, oh, it was a long drive. Don't care. Get there. Be there. You said you're going to be somewhere. They need you for the show. Get there.
I mean, yeah, and like you think about these people when we go to these rural towns for WWE Live or for Smackdown or whatever, who have waited the entire year to see their favorite superstar be there. Like, I think you have to remember that for us, yeah, we do the same show maybe 3 times a week when it comes to live shows. But for them, they have literally waited and saved up. And this has been all they've dreamed about for months. And so if you not showing up could literally just be like what devastates them. So having to keep that mentality.
Every year for Christmas, I have 3 boys, and I like to do one big kind of surprise present for them. And so I bought them tickets to the house show in Hartford, which happens always right after Christmas. Vince likes to keep the family local. And I took some cards and I wrote out on each card. So it was like Wheel of Fortune. Like it spelled out, money. And that was it was the Raw. And it was the Raw that got snowed out.
Oh, I remember
The
that.
one time.
The one time in the history of the WWE they didn't do a show was the one I bought tickets for.
JBL did an on-camera from the top of the tower in a blizzard.
Wasn't Dean Ambrose running around up there on the roof?
He was doing. I forget what he was doing, but he was going. I forget what it was. We aired the bulk of. I think it was the Rumble the night before, so we aired the bulk of the pay, and it was a crazy, a rating that the show did and everything because we gave them most of the pay-per-view because it was like we literally are doing a show last minute in a blizzard. And
there was like an intrigue factor. It's like, oh, well, they're going to come on the air. What the heck are they going to do?
Right. What are we going to do? And then the funny thing, so I think the Monday, so that was in Hartford. And I'm trying to remember what the travel was, or the pay-per-view was in Philadelphia. Oh, it was when Roman won the Rumble, I guess. Or no. I don't know. I have no idea where I am. So we went from Philly to Hartford, and because SmackDown at that point was taped on Tuesday but aired on Thursday, everybody just pretty much camped out for 2 days, and the hotel Wi-Fi you couldn't get on because the entire freaking company is in the hotel watching movies and stuff like that, just kind of trying to get work done and everything. So it was a lot of fun. Just hunkered down.
Cole, what do you got for us?
Look at this huge line of people that bum rushed the stage, and there's Cole.
So you mentioned earlier about WrestleMania, and it's like an 8-hour show. It's very long. So Michael Cole kind of lost his voice towards the end of it this year. So how do you make sure you take care of your voice over the course of a show that is that long, and make sure you still have all the energy necessary at the very end of the show?
So Cole had first of all, a really tall task this year, especially at WrestleMania, because he essentially called 3, let's call them quote-unquote main event matches, in that the open of the show was Seth and Brock for the Universal Championship, Batista and Triple H in a no-holds-barred match where if Triple H lost, he had to retire. So the gravity of that match alone is enormous. And then also the first women's main event in the history of WrestleMania. I would have lost my voice too, because you have to treat all 3 as if they're the main event of WrestleMania. So hats off to him that he finished the show, and the man did Raw the next night. So absolutely incredible. So I had a very different night in that the biggest match I called, Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan for the WWE title. My night was different, and WrestleManias are such because the order is not necessarily going to, for one brand, because I only call the SmackDown matches, it may not be like a conventional pay-per-view where it's, you ramp up the intensity as the night goes along, going from, let's say, 1 to 10 as an example. Kofi was, I think, the second to last match that I called, and that was the most important one because it was the WWE Championship. So my night kind of went up and then down in terms of intensity. And not that I didn't give credence to all those matches that I called, but I have to treat Kofi versus Daniel as a main event. So I had to save my voice for different moments and everything, and then waiting for that moment to come up. I will say hydrate, because I do that before a show, and I just have to do that every day, because if I just don't bother to drink water one day, start feeling sick, or my throat will seize up or something like that. But after a show, I'm putting away 3-4 bottles of water just to kind of, all right, lubricate the pipes and all that stuff. And then the next day, same exact thing, really, really heavy on that.
I just talent coached with the Call of Duty guys this past weekend in Miami, and they do 6-8 hour broadcasts. And they told me, I'm not endorsing this, but they found there's something sold in Germany like Revoicer or Voice Rehealer or something.
Yeah, I've seen those like sprays or something. Spray,
yeah. And they all swear by it. Not that I'm saying like
Ricola.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Cam, you got some online questions for us?
Yeah. This is from James, who's watching from London. He said you two mentioned getting notes from writers. Do you get notes from the wrestlers themselves, as far as like maybe new moves they're gonna roll out, so that you know the names of them, things like that?
Yeah, there's instances where they will give us a name for something, or they want us to get in a particular story about themselves. different elements, or maybe they did some sort of meeting earlier in the day, or with meeting, like maybe they had a Be a Star rally or something like that, for instance. It's like, hey, I got to work with these great kids. Could you please mention this on the show? I know Titus O'Neil has a book coming out and everything. It's like, oh, here's my book and all that. So talk about his book. But yeah, that happens plenty. And every once in a while, a guy will come to you and be like, I need a name for this. And it's, oh, it's like, I'm honored you came to talk to me about that. And I'm like, I'm probably not the person to talk to about that. So there's some cool instances like that. So that happens all the time.
Going back to the social media aspect of that, are you constantly checking their social media to make
Yes.
sure you didn't miss a storyline that they're putting out there?
I take a screenshot of a tweet, usually during the week, because I'm following, I think, everybody in our company. And I'll take a screenshot of a tweet, and I'm like, I can use this on Tuesday. And then even then, depending on how the show is laid out, if that person is or is not on the show, I remember I used a quote from a tweet that Samoa Joe used a year ago, and I used it a year later for after he won the United States Championship, because he had some line about solemn promises and grand prognostications and everything. His diction is brilliant. And I was like, I love that line. And I wrote that in my iPad, and I saved it for a year, and I finally got to use it. I can't recall when, but little moments like that are special to me to be able to bring forward that. I don't know if Joe would even recognize that when he watches back the broadcast, or anybody watching at home, but it's just trying to bring things full circle.
Similar for you when you're doing backstage interviews, your interaction with them to make sure that you're putting out what they want put out?
Oh, for sure. Same thing. I follow everyone, and so there's even moments when I'm going over with the team, what direction we're taking interviews and stuff. And a lot of times I'll say, well, they just tweeted this. Do we need to, should I bring this up? And so yeah, definitely staying on top of all of that.
Mr. Burns.
So traditional sports have off seasons. How do you deal with the fact that there is no off season in the WWE?
Honestly, I see it as a huge positive, because one of the difficult things about broadcasting as a whole is chaining together work. So when season ends, what are you doing when it's over? Are you doing a different job altogether that's even in the field? So I'm very fortunate that I don't have to worry about seasons. It is tough to do it every week of the year, sure, but 10 times harder on the in-ring talent, obviously, because it's a nonstop grind. But for us as commentators, I personally am like, I have a job 52 weeks out of the year, as opposed to, if you're a baseball guy, all right, season's over. What are you doing with yourself? Are you calling a different sport? So I consider myself lucky.
And it keeps you sharp. You think you take months off from a task that you're used to doing every day, and it keeps you sharp.
I took 2 weeks off for my honeymoon, and I came back and I was like, I completely forgot how to do this. And I was like swimming in deep water, and so it took me a minute to kind of get back on the horse. So I like having it every week. Like if I alter from my routine, I'm like, oh, this is a little different.
Same.
It's kind of like not having a summer break here. We're keeping you sharp, going to class all the time. Trent, looking sharp as always.
Thank you. Thankfully, this mic stand is shorter than it looked up there.
Trent, you looking
fine,
sharp as
Burnsy.
always?
You look fine. Yeah. Sit down, Burnsy.
How much time did you guys have from getting signed to the WWE between actually getting brought up to NXT or SmackDown Live?
NXT is still to this day kind of the introductory point for a lot of broadcasters. And it has been like that for the whole time that I've been here. So NXT was pretty immediate in terms of working on that. And I didn't get my first opportunity on the main roster until I think a year in. It was literally September 2012 I got hired. September 2013 I did my first episode of Main Event, which is a show we tape before Raw on Mondays. So that was my first opportunity getting called up, however you want to put it. And then my first opportunity on SmackDown was, I think, 6 months after that. So it depends on need, and it depends on if you're ready. I can honestly say that first stint on SmackDown, I wasn't ready for it, but we do our best because there's things that comes up in terms of need where it's like, okay, we need that person and everything, let's go. There's no time to really wait and let that person marinate and learn. There have been plenty of instances where we do our best to make sure that doesn't happen, the call up, so to speak, or whatever, that move to Raw or SmackDown doesn't happen for as long as possible. And that's not because someone isn't talented. That's not because someone can't handle the situation. It's just the longer you get and the more experience you get. I very much believe in the sports analogy, plug and play. So that way, if, for instance, Kayla Braxton spends, let's say, a year in NXT, 2 years in NXT, when she goes to Raw or SmackDown or a major pay-per-view and she goes in and she fits immediately, job's done. Not bad. So
I know I got really antsy. It took me a little bit to be fully on the main roster because I think it probably took about 2 years for me to actually be 100%. And I was antsy, I was like bugging he and Cole, like, is it my time? Is it my time? Is it my time? And obviously we told, be patient. There's big things. And now that I'm here, I'm so grateful that I spent that much time at NXT and was able to develop and learn. Because I like how we've seen people who have been here, who are no longer here, who may have gotten thrown in too quickly. And I mean, not that they did poorly, but they definitely took them a little longer to get acclimated. And I feel like I was able to just kind of jump in. At that point, everyone knows who you are, so you don't feel out of place in the locker rooms. And yeah, but like I said, it definitely varies.
And what they're describing is a common occurrence throughout the sportscasting industry. We had anchors come to ESPN and wanted to do SportsCenter right away. They had to be on ESPN News. In retrospect, they were probably glad they got to make mistakes on ESPN News when the audience was much smaller than the 11 o'clock SportsCenter. You're also coming to a place where Steve Levy's still there. John Anderson's still there. John Buttagras is still there. When are they leaving? Probably not until ESPN kicks them out the door. So can you have the patience to do what ESPN's telling you to do in the interim? Or is it like, well, I'm never going to get on the 11 o'clock SportsCenter as long as those guys are here, so I'm going to go somewhere else. You could be a minor league baseball broadcaster, and the play-by-play guy for the Cubs, he's not leaving. So maybe you move your way up from AA to AAA, or now you're going to have to go take that job in Billings, Montana, or somewhere else. So that's a common occurrence throughout the industry that patience plays off, but I think part of it is recognizing where you are. If it's a good place, it's probably worth hanging out for.
Thank you, guys.
If you were a wrestler, what would your name be and what would your finisher be?
Tom. Laying down. I've never given that any thought.
Seriously?
I had one instance where I got in the ring to learn how to, what we call bumping and everything, which is just learning how to fall properly without hurting yourself. And it's challenging because our guys make it look effortless. And that's the beauty of what we do, is that there is an art form behind the physical work. So I'm doing this, and like we're in the ring, and it's like you have to physically throw yourself back. It's extraordinarily unnatural. You have to tuck your chin and spread your shoulders and kind of use your arms to absorb the impact. And the one thing I forgot to do is breathe, because if you hold your breath, boom, you take that and everything. It's all just sits in your chest and everything. So I forgot to do that. And my feet just were straight up in the air. I was on my back. I'm like, ow. And I forget who it was like, oh, you have to sell. I'm like, I am selling. I'm in a ton of pain right now. So, yeah, I haven't given it any thought about getting in the ring.
Kayla?
No, I did the same thing as him. No way.
You rolled out of the ring. You took one and like you just
whimpered and like
rolled as slowly as possible out, like it was a slow moving fire or something.
And I had the helmet on. I had like everything, and I forgot to tuck my chin. Yeah. That was what I did. But I went up to the talent after. I said, I have so much more respect for what you do. We're gonna leave that to you. I'll announce you what.
All right. I'd be the pool dad, and I'd wear like the oversized bathing trunks, and my finisher would be the can opener off the top rope, and I'd lift the knee and hit you with the big splash.
You'll love that bump.
Yeah.
That's great.
Who's the person, I know they're all wonderful, but when you get to do a backstage interview with somebody that you're like, oh, I can't wait to do this.
I love interviewing the New Day. For a while when I first was on SmackDown Live, I was kind of like their interviewer, so like it was always something fun that we do backstage. By far, when I'm being told I'm going to interview the New Day, I get really excited about it.
Do you have a favorite New Day interview that you did?
I mean, I think they all end in them making me dance. So they all kind of have the same ending.
Did you get to interview Kofi after WrestleMania when he won? Did you do it backstage with him for digital or anything?
Oh, I'm sure I did. And of course that I mean, just the story of the New Day and the fact that Kofi is a WWE champion and like what's happening right now. You know, I mean, I feel like there's so much. We're seeing so much or more layers within the other members. You know, Xavier and with Big E, and I did an interview with him I think last week, and it's just like there's this new fire. But they're still the New Day, which is what's really cool. So there's like with them on commentary, they're hyped, they're pumped.
Oh, yeah,
but they're still throwing pancakes and blowing the tube.
The sign of any great entertainer broadcaster is evolution. And do you do the same thing over and over, or do you evolve? And so you can keep your base, you can keep your pedigree, but how do you change? And those three are perfect at it.
You and I have talked briefly in the past about the Kofi story and just how that really blew up really out of nowhere. And I think it's also an indication of the power of social media now and maybe at some level the influence. It's that focus group feedback. Just briefly walk us through kind of your point of view of how that all unfolded.
It was the strangest thing because he was not supposed to be. We have a pay-per-view called Elimination Chamber, and that night we had a WWE Championship match inside the chamber. So there's 4 people in pods, and I think it was 6 people totals. 2 guys start the match, and Kofi was not supposed to be in that match. Ali was supposed to be in the match, gets injured earlier in the week, so Kofi is inserted into the match. If that doesn't happen, potentially everything we're seeing right now does not happen. And it's fascinating that it can come down to be that small. Now you see in sports all the time, Drew Bledsoe gets hurt. It's the rise of Tom Brady. Those things happen plenty of times. So it was amazing for that to happen. He had an incredible performance in the chamber at the pay-per-view. Didn't win, but made everybody think. And it just developed, and it really felt overnight, even though it took 11 years for him to get to that point, is that he was knocking on the door for so many years. And what he was doing, again, with New Day, it's like our audience knows Kofi inside out and backwards at this point after a decade. And for him then to struggle and grind with the gauntlet matches he had to go through, now it's almost to a point where he's been champion for over 100 days. Who would have thought he'd be WWE champion, let alone champion for that long, is an astounding feat. So Kofi's somebody that I genuinely respect and appreciate, and I'm a huge admirer of. So everything that was happening, I was so invested, and I think all of us on commentary were.
I remember in the moment thinking, I'm so glad they got his moment. I'm going to be bummed tomorrow night when he loses the title.
Oh, well, yeah. But, like, your brain goes there, and that's
Yeah.
the fun part about what we do is because, like, literally anything can happen. So those moments are fleeting, but they're special. And I remember, again, his WrestleMania match, you have to go into it. And it's, again, like any championship game or match or anything, you have to have your call for a win, and you have to have your call for a loss. Or if Daniel Bryan had won, for instance. And I did my best because in my mind I was like, I want to duplicate Doug Flutie's Hail Mary at Boston College. Flutie did it, Flutie did it, Flutie did it. And I got to do that for Kofi. And I was thinking about it all day, and I just hope that it landed and that it landed the right way. So that was so much fun.
We only have a couple more minutes on the stream, so if that ends, thank you everybody who's been online. But we have a few more questions here, so I want to get to those too. So Adrian, looking sharper than Bernsey.
Good morning. That's a usual.
That's funny to me.
Tom, you mentioned the revolving door that comes about on the broadcast team, and Kayla, you kind of made a mention of the people who aren't there anymore. No specifics, don't need names, but what are the broad strokes reasons that those people aren't there anymore on your team?
It's very much an environment, adapt or die. And if you're thrown into the mix, and it's not because you're not talented, but it's just if you don't handle it in the moment, if maybe it was too big for you in the moment, or the pressure of the situations you're getting put in on TV, you have to be able to keep up. It is a gigantic boulder rolling downhill. So you either get out of the way or you get run over by it. And I think we've had tons of talented people that have come in and out of WWE, and it's just a matter of we talk about culture a lot. Is it a culture fit? Our company is a very specific culture, and then at the same time, can you adapt in a live atmosphere? And do you become complacent? I've seen that with a handful of people where it's just, we talked about I've made it moments. Is that the end? Or are you going to keep moving from there? Okay, that's a great moment. That's a cool little thing to take a picture of and hang on your wall. But are you going to go from A to B to C and everything, or are you just going to rest on that? So that's my opinion.
You got to keep your ego checked and at the door. I think one thing we hear every time someone gets brought in, when I got brought in, was congrats on whatever you did before you got here, but we don't care. Like, you have to keep your ego in check and realize that it is not about us at all. It is not about the broadcasters. It's our job to make sure we make the WWE superstars look as important and as big as they possibly can. So I feel like that's another reason.
You vaguely resemble a guy I know named Jarrett.
I feel like every day I see
Wildly
we have-
underdressed.
Yeah.
Hi, guys. So with WWE's product being so engulfing and there's so much to keep up with, you guys have a full-time gig with them. Is it difficult to keep up and sort of block out the noise, or do you almost encourage the distractions?
What do you mean by distractions?
Just, other content to follow, hanging out with people that aren't wrestling related.
like having like a life outside of WWE.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah. Do you find it difficult to balance that, or is it welcome to sort of stay away from wrestling every once in a while?
Yeah, every once in a while you need to take a step back and just kind of not think about it and unplug, so to speak. I think that's any job. That's not just broadcasting. That's anything. I remember an old episode of Tough Enough when Triple H was still a regular active competitor, and he said, when you're on the road, you got to be Superman. Then you come home and you got to be Super Dad or Super Mom or whatever it is. Or if you're not even a parent, you're that for your significant other, or you're that to your friends and your family. So I very much take that to heart in terms of, all right, I go on the road and I've got my routine and I got to put on a good show and everything. But then when I come home, I've got to take care of things at home. It doesn't stop. And we work plenty from home and all that. The thing we mentioned earlier is that we don't have 24/7 TV. So if you're not doing something during the week to get better, you wasted time. I watch back hours of tape every single week and working with a lot of our other announcers to critique our own work and go back and make sure we're picking it apart and we're learning something every week. So it's a very, very challenging mindset to unplug. Like I have a really hard time unplugging. I'm stuck to my phone all the time. This is the longest I think I've been apart from it in 6 years. So it's tough, but I personally, you need those moments to get away and be with your family and, do anything else.
And the company allows and encourages it. Like you said with Triple H. I think one thing with my best friend, for example, got married Money in the Bank. And I was like, really? But she did. And it was one of those moments where I was like, I love my job. I don't want to miss something to that magnitude. And I talked to Michael Cole about it. And he's like, Kayla, he goes, you spend so much time here. He's like, you can't look back and realize you missed being in your best friend's wedding. And it was really nice to hear because they do care. They don't want you to miss those huge moments in your life because you were working. And I think it may be a different mentality now than it was back when Cole first started in WWE. But yeah, I personally, I have lots of friends in Orlando. I really try to take a step back. But like he said, it is hard to disconnect because there's stuff happening on social media. Oh my gosh, do you see Becky Lynch just said X, so we are constantly in it, but yeah.
And I just love it. I don't know.
And that's it too. I love it too.
I watch other wrestling too, and I'm like, my wife's like, what are you doing? And I was like, I wanted to see this match, I wanted to kind of hear what this was all about, so.
I don't know you, but my friends don't watch wrestling. They don't understand it at all. And I'll sit there or we'll be downtown. But hey, tell the TV guy to put on USA Network on Monday when I'm there. My friends are literally Kayla, you just go home.
Yeah, it was great to be at ESPN and go home and turn on a game.
Thank you, Jarrett.
And tell my wife I'm working. I'm working. Chris, hi, Chris.
Hello. There we
Tall
go.
people, Mike.
Yes, tall people. So, if the stars didn't align for you and you didn't get to where you are now, what was your plan B?
Outside of if I wasn't a broadcaster?
Yeah.
Plan B? I wanted to be a storm chaser. I'm obsessed with weather.
That is the last thing I would have guessed. Storm chaser.
Well, now
chasing tornadoes? and
Now we
stuff?
know her character when she becomes a wrestler.
Wow. Where did that come from, though?
Being raised in Texas prior, and there were tornadoes always, and me and my mom would literally go chase them in our car and get pictures of them.
So what's the closest you've come to a storm?
What is?
Yeah.
Getting in a car and chasing down a tornado.
50 yards, 100
Oh,
yards.
cool. I mean, way closer than.
Are we
should have
talking Honda Civic or?
been. I think old hatchback VW from night. Yeah.
And Tom, you'd be managing the Olive Garden?
Yeah, probably. I'd still be at Olive Garden. I remember, honestly, like I had the idea in my head to be in broadcasting. Literally, I was 12 years old, and I went to my mom and dad, and I was like, I want to be a broadcaster. I want to be a play-by-play announcer because I'd seen these guys on TV, and God bless them, they were like, go for it. You know, work towards your goal. Here are the ways to do it and everything, and they pointed me in the right direction. I have no idea what I'd be doing outside of this.
With that voice, his deep voice, I feel like he'd be like the Morgan Freeman like voice actor.
He could be the movie trailer guy.
Andy Dufresne.
Yeah, the movie trailer guy. Yeah. Coming in July.
I really have no earthly idea what I'd be doing if I wasn't a broadcaster because I've just been thinking about it since I was a kid. I genuinely don't know. I really don't know. I wish I had a better answer for you. This is what I was always interested in doing.
Thank you, Chris.
One more,
follow-up.
just for funsies.
Open
Is there
mic night.
anyone at the company who is still salty about not being WWF anymore?
I don't think so. We got the F out, man. Yeah, I don't know.
Before we wrap up, I've always been curious. You have a lot of people who don't get to hold the title, and they have to stay motivated. They have to feel like they matter. I know you guys aren't wrestlers, but you're around them. Just what's the challenge for them? There are people who go months without even being on TV. And I know they get a paycheck, but how do they handle not being in the limelight all the time or attaining the goals that they're trying to attain?
It's hard for me to speak on just because, again, I'm not in their shoes, and I cannot imagine the frustration that comes with that and the paranoia and the turmoil that has to go on in your head, potentially in your home life, because there's a lot of things that, again, to your point, it's a paycheck, but your paycheck is matched by your ambition, or maybe it isn't. It doesn't. Sometimes it changes. So if you're happy just getting that paycheck, fine, go for it. But I think ambition and drive and desire is what puts everybody ahead or puts everybody in a different situation. So I cannot imagine what some of those guys and girls go through in terms of just living in their head. And it's tough for us, again, Kayla mentioned 2 years of when am I going to get my chance and everything, and has finally got her chance. And when it comes, if it comes, it's special. It's spectacular. We've talked about Kofi Kingston a lot today. What we're seeing right now is spectacular, and I'm sure he genuinely means it when he says it, that 11 years for this was worth it. So.
Well, it's been special and spectacular having you guys join us today. Let's hear it for Tom
Heck of a
and Kayla.
transition there. Oh, I love that.
Thank you all for coming out.
Thank you for having us.
Didn't get down off the chair by myself. Thank you. Oh, my legs are asleep.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Kayla, Storm Chaser for real? Like, you're not afraid of just getting sucked up into the tornado?
I was in a cruise this week, and the storm, the waves were so menacing. I was just like sitting there thinking, like, I could be one with the. Like, I just love it. Love it.
My dad would get